let us start to jump directly into the deep dive topic. What are the major challenges in freight for an Hyperloop? Harj, do you want to start? A little bit too broke. Because you support me all the time.
I knew you'd pick on me. Biggest challenges in freight. Look, I think the biggest challenge is to make freight competitive vis-a-vis road transport. Yeah. If we consider now that I'm going to take the regions that I am familiar with. So you look at India. 70% of freight in India is moved on the highway, still today. Yeah. Container freight only becomes competitive, or intermodal freight only becomes competitive in distances greater than about 250, 300 kilometers. Yep. So the challenge is, how do we actually make the whole process of freight movement much more competitive to bring it in line, right, with road freight? And in India, if you look at the freight and logistics report that came out in 2021, there is a key target that the Indian government's now set, and they want to actually move that 70% of container or logistics transport by highway. 45% of that now needs to actually be by rail freight. So there is a big push to start looking at how we make logistics and freight much more competitive.
Thank you.
With highways, with roads.
Yeah, I would come a bit from another angle. So if a cargo Hyperloop wants to add something to the table now, because we have the challenges now in transport, then it would have to be ready now. And if we do not speed up, then there might be already other solutions in place. Just to give you some numbers, in current semi-trailers running on European highways is more spare capacity than railways are transporting now. So if somebody would put on top like a self-propelled, electrified, autonomous, platooned truck system on a German highway, and German highways are the nicest ones, then you would have even more capacity. So I think we have to have something now in place to be a real alternative, and if you want to be a real alternative, solving problems now, you have to add capacity. Hyperloop could add huge capacity, but it's not there yet. So, and as I said, I think we have 10 years. That was also Ben's statement in the beginning. And in that 10 years, we have to increase rail and get something done in Hyperloop.
Yeah, just to add, I think also the competition and the cost, of course, because usually it's, the margin of benefit is very low. So that's why if you have a new solution that you offer, it has to be competitive and also cost efficient. So definitely, if you want to compete with the automotive sector and with the trucks, then you have to bring an efficient solution that can be also beating the prices. Also, what I think that experience from the railway sector, that it was very fragmented, so it started from a national point of view, and then it's very difficult now to move it to cross-border operation. There are lots of technical issues, there are lots of interoperability aspects. So what you have discussed in the previous panel in the morning, it's very important for Hyperloop to make the standardization, join forces, and then also ensure that you don't develop non-interoperable solutions, because that will be not maintainable, I think, in Europe for sure, but also in maybe the other world of the other countries of the world. And also from a European perspective, because of course the joint undertaking is 50% financed by the Union, it's very important to align with the Commission, because they are going to bring this European aspect into it. And as it was said by the colleague Piotr, they are supporting Hyperloop, so there are different financial schemes available. You have to use these benefits and then make Hyperloop accessible for passengers and maybe for freight as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything really said already. However, the one point that I want to mention is the overall. Yeah, to look at, you need governance, you need the regulations to even start with it. Yeah, you need the infrastructure to set it up. Then you need something on the infrastructure to move it. Then you need I think a lot of people said it, interoperability. So it needs to be compatible, yeah? And then comes all the things on top that it needs to be cost efficient. There needs to be a trigger point that someone actually says, I'm going to do that, I'm going to invest in that. And I think that is the biggest challenge, to actually change the mindset of people, that they are open to discuss it and say, yes, I can see the benefit, I can see not only the cost benefit, I can see the overall benefit, but that they actually say, let's do it now. I think that is the challenge that I see.
Thank you. Sabine, in your last job, you worked also for Deutsche Bahn?
That's right. I spent about over 22 years in Asia Pacific working for DB Schenker. So I've seen any kind of logistics from air, ocean, road, land transport. I've done specialized logistics projects, yeah, which I think, Stefan, you mentioned it before. It's when someone asks you, will they actually fit? Will the Nevomo ones, the option fit for all the wagons? And you said, well, maybe 85-90%, because there's always specialized ones. The idea is to get the scalability right, to actually say, well, when can you move a lot of things, and when is it actually the speed? Maybe it's not the speed, maybe it's more the capacity, yeah? But then what you just said as well is at the cost. And I think, Harj, you and I, we had the discussion before. In the end, it's about you can deliver a lot with technology, but what's the trigger point? So what is actually the need of someone to say, yes, I'm ready to invest in that? Yeah? And I think that's what we all here have to work on, to make sure that the need is seen.
Because if you are thinking about Deutsche Telekom, it's asset light. We are here working on asset heavy, but the next step will be we need also the asset light players into the game when we are speaking in terms of automatic driven vehicles in the port or something else,
Exactly. That is, of course, what else is there. And I think in some of the presentations before it was mentioned that there's obviously other technologies that sort of have an interface, let's say, with what's happening here right now. But to be honest with you, you read the sci-fi books of the 1920s, yeah? You see things happening right now. So if in 50 years' time we look back and we think, remember the guys when they were on stage at Hyperloop, how funny what they talked about, And now everyone is going around in ports. I think we see it different once we are in the future.
Great. Something to add?
Yeah. Or? I think just to sort of add on that, and we're talking about challenges in freight. The other big challenge is capacity. Again, if we look at e-commerce now and the growth of e-commerce, and certainly since the pandemic, the need to actually get goods moving from continent to continent, country to country, has never been more, I think, important than it is right now. Yeah, certainly both to e-commerce and but also to logistics providers. And when it goes wrong, it goes wrong. And I think when we look at the bottlenecks, the empty running, the poor management of freight that led to the bottlenecks that experience, which had huge knock-on effects if you think about what happened to supply chains, goods, knock-on onto inflation and economics, massive impact. So I think freight and logistics is probably now front and center of most government initiatives. And again, if you look at India's got 205 ports, right? Medium, intermediate. It's got 13 megaports. 5 of those megaports are operating at 100% capacity. So there has to be new solutions that are driven by technology to enable better, more effective and efficient movement of freight.
Yeah, maybe also adding up on top of it, because what was not said yet is that logistics is about a network. So the successful logistic companies like Schenker, DHL, they are not operating like cherry picking one line. They offer a network for the customers. And if we cannot build a network right away, and I think we can all agree that this will not happen like next year, then we have to use the other concepts. So that's why it's about interoperability and finding starting networks where we could maybe add something faster, something more fancy. But I agree here with you, Sabine. I think at the end it's more about flexibility and frequency and not about speed. So if we have, like for example, a tube, maybe at reduced speed, at proper costs, the capacity would be even higher. I was participating in a project when I was also still with Deutsche Bahn, so it's like a Deutsche Bahn alumni a bit today. And we were investigating an TGV fast train from Frankfurt Airport to Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands. And the overall goods that could be transported in between were just too little. So there was one fully, properly full TGV train once a week. And that it's again not beating on frequency, because if you take a truck, even like a very slow truck and, I don't know, taking pauses, drinking Red Bull or whatever, then it would still be faster than the TGV train going once a week. So it's, again, like about pods and smaller vehicles in a higher frequency, and less about like levitating containers at 1,000 kilometers. Yeah.
Thank you. I got also some questions from the audience and also people in social media and from you. Ladies and gentlemen, second question is, do you see today's rail logistics operator as a user or an operator when you think about the Hyperloop concept in the future?
I would say hard to answer. I think this is how they would involve. It's already today, like you have the railway undertakings just doing the traction, and you have operators just managing the goods. And I think the Hyperloop concept is more fitting to operators, because then it's just like another vehicle, they book capacity. And in a Hyperloop world, there will be no railway undertakings, because like the infrastructure and the pods are somehow like combined. And the infrastructure also like gives here the command. So this is like driven by like an compiled infrastructure Hyperloop system. So I would doubt that there are any like Hyperloop railway undertakings in place. So it's more like operators. And then the question is more, who owns the pods? So who basically has it? And there might be players like DHL and such that are maybe now better in offering such service than the current railway undertakings. And so I think for railway undertakings and railway operators, when Hyperloop comes, they have to see really like discuss their own business models again.
Something to add?
Sorry, Sabine.
Yeah. I agree with Stefan. I would add a little bit more to that, because I see it with shipping lines as well. No? You look at shipping lines these days, they are basically owner of ships many times, but they're also users. So I think it's a bit of both. Yeah. Although I agree with you, the tendency is more on the operation side, but I still think they could be seen as a user. It depends very much on the business model. So what's their strategy? What is their business model like? What is their target operating model? So for me, it's a little bit like, could be both, but probably a bit more 70% operator, would be my view.
So what I can see that in the joint undertaking, the infrastructure managers are quite interested. So they are interested in participating also in R&I area. So I think there is indeed an appetite, and what we have seen also in the presentations earlier, that they would like to better understand what's going on at the Hyperloop developers field. So in the beginning, they saw that it's a competition. Now they also may be looking at the possibility to have a part of the cake. So it's an interesting question that we will see in a few years' time, I believe.
I'm just to add to all of you guys. I think I agree with you. I think owner operator depends on the use case and the business model. Yeah, I mean, if you are looking at an enclosed use case like a port, owner-operator, yeah, because they'll integrate it with their operational system and their operational processes, yeah. Whereas I think as soon as you go out into an open use case, into a network point A to point B, then I think you could separate it out depending on, again, the use case and the interest.
Hey, mate, I think it's also like a chance for the existing players, because if you see railways now, and I said like I've worked there for so many years, if you would want to build a railway undertaking, for example, now, and want to like apply to all routes that, for example, DB Netz has in Germany, I've counted those number of pages once, it's 35,000 pages that you have to be compliant with to order just one track. So if you would start reading now, you would need, I don't know, 50 days if you read like 1 minute, 1 page or so. And if the complexity is gone of operations, because I said, like in Hyperloop and also Macrail, the operations is done by the infrastructure, and you just give you a pod. This also allows for new players to be part of such kind of a transport system. And I could imagine that some players, also in passenger transport, could maybe cool operators going forward. Imagine like a McDonald's pod, or I don't know, Hilton Group operating a pod with higher service on board than maybe the current players have in place. So I think this is also like a good option to lower the market entry barriers, because that part of the complexity is gone. Other complexities arise, like from the technology as we discussed like the whole day.
Great idea.
Thanks.
Thanksgiving. Where do you see opportunities, challenges in an intermodal approach regarding air freight and Hyperloop freight?
A question for Sabine.
Well, once again, Martin, that's a very good question, actually, because in the end, coming back to my topic, what is actually the need? Yeah, what should actually be achieved? Yeah, you look at air freight. I guess air freight and Hyperloop could be a good connection. If you say, you have long transit, and then you bring it across to, Europe or to Asia, and then you put on the Hyperloop, it would make sense. On the other hand, in Europe, you've got a very dense network of airports. Yeah, so really, in the end, it comes back to, I think Stefan mentioned it before, that you have to figure out where you want to go, but also the route planning. So pick a route, and I think Julia showed it very nicely, that they looked at a route where it actually most makes sense, yeah? To say, where would it actually be a business case, a use case that someone says it actually makes sense, yeah? So I think it would need an analysis of those ones, but the combination, if you say you have time-sensitive freight, and if you could work at a level when the cost would be better for that business model then it's definitely a good combination.
Sorry, I'm just going to sort of build on what you're saying, and I think in the past we've sort of studied use cases around Hyperloop technology and airports, and you can have. I'll come back onto freight, but the use cases that we actually identified. One was airport-to-airport connectors, where you've actually got satellite airports that need connecting, right? And I'll give you an example. I mean, we did a study between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and the new airport in South Dubai, Maktoum Airport by Expo. It's about 65 kilometers, yeah? And that would take you about 6-7 minutes in a Hyperloop. It takes you about 6-7 minutes to go from Terminal A to Terminal C right now on Dubai. But for Dubai Airport to expand to the passenger demands in 5 years from now, they just don't have the passenger capacity there, but they need to build it out in Maktoum. So you could actually extend the life. You could actually sort of have satellite operations where you could have hard infrastructure runways in one location and passenger infrastructure in another location, join the two together, and that would enable you to actually build out the required infrastructure over time. I think on the freight side, I think I agree with you. I think medium short haul is where we always thought that the Hyperloop technology would actually fit in. Therefore, time-sensitive goods would actually fall into that category. I think specific use cases would then be on a use. I mean, if there's a specific case which is 50 kilometers, 20 kilometers, or connecting inland container depots to maybe a port, that could be a specific use case. So yeah.
Adding up on top on the intermodal part, because it was my business for some years. I think on intermodal you have like two market segments. One is like maritime, so sea containers, and the other one is continental, which is semi-trailers. So starting with containers, I think if containers would come not via ship, but like with a very long Hyperloop line from China, I think then the number of containers would be sufficient to maybe pay off even for such a huge infrastructure. For hinterland, like Hamburg, Rotterdam to Munich or whatever, I doubt it a bit because like the overall travel time is already so long. So I don't know, 10 weeks from China to Rotterdam, then 1 week in the stock, and then it levitates to Munich in an hour. So that hour or 1 day on train, I think is not making a huge difference. And then if the distance would be complete distance and we would substitute the container ships, which are also not very sustainable, I think that could be a case. On continental, I doubt that somebody could wrap up a semi-trailer with the wheels underneath. So basically the semi-trailers are out from my perspective, but you could use the Europallets inside of the semi-trailers. But Europallets is very price sensitive. I think Sabine might have the accurate pricing. Like an Europallet from Hamburg to Munich is maybe like 200 euros, 180 maybe now with the prices dropping. Yeah. So imagine like how many Europallets you would have to transport on one single line to pay off for the infrastructure. So you can do the math on your own. So cost of infrastructure and operations and divided by 180, maybe just the margin if you're not the full operator, and then you get the number of Europallets. And I doubt that there are like shorter lines in Europe, in small Europe, that would be able like to fill a complete Hyperloop at capacity. Yeah. So it's about longer lines because then the speed issue pumps in, and maybe for container transports. Yeah.
Some questions from the audience? No, because it's live stream. Alexei, come to us, please. Thank you.
So actually, guys, I wanted to ask you a question and continue yesterday's discussion. You know, conference actually started yesterday, and it was very fruitful discussion. So, question first: if we speak about freight, do you believe it's underwater or overwater if we build about continental Hyperloop that will connect different continents? And also, do you believe it's a challenge if it's implemented in different polar sides of the world, for example, far north in the Arctics or in the south in the deserts?
I think we'll be over water and called ship loop. So there are container ships, and I think we will have like green container ships before we will have an intercontinental transatlantic Hyperloop. But this is my point of view. Yeah.
Well, I'm based in the Middle East. Nothing's off the cards.
Middle East, India, maybe.
Middle East, India. I remember, when we were at Virgin, we actually had an organisation come to talk to us about a trans sort of Arabian Sea link to Mumbai. So whether or not with the G20 summit now, putting a new rail route in between Mumbai and Europe, that will start raising its head again. Who knows? But yeah, it may come back.
My idea would be also that start small, experience how it works in ports or combining different ports and transport hubs before you think of such a large scale. So it's a step-by-step approach.
So you mean try the Rhine River first before you try the big ocean? No, Alex, I love the question, actually. It's a good question, and I think it's great. We need to dream big on these kind of things. And I used to live in Australia, so 24-hour flights. I would love to just do that, go on Hyperloop, and might be quicker. But I think you need to look at geopolitical topics. You need to also look at climate change, to be honest. Safety is an aspect there as well. And I'm with what Judit said as well. I think we want to reach something already big with Hyperloop, and that's first, that mindset change and interoperability and all what was mentioned before. And I think to actually then say, going through the ocean, I'm with Stefan there, that probably green container ships, they might be there faster than that idea. Yeah, as much as I would like to see it, but.
But hopefully you will be able to. But hopefully you will be able to come to Riga from Australia using Hyperloop.
Well, I hope you keep fingers crossed. See what happens.
Thank you. Thank you. Go straight through the globe. What do you believe, when will be the first Hyperloop commercial cargo line will run, and maybe where? You can.
Tough question. I think
we will watch the video in 5 years, and then we know.
That's right. I think so. Well. The word here is commercial, yeah. So I think you have where you are around in Dubai and other places. There's Nevomo, there's other cities, there is smart cities around, future cities being built. I think yes, people can do it right now to actually show that it works and can do the tracks whichever long. The commercial part is where we have to get to, yeah. And I think some of the things is we talked about it earlier today is the timing part of it. I think we need to do that first step first to actually say we get the first people with an MVP, with a minimum viable product online to actually say we have a use case so that others start on the bandwagon. And I think that needs to be done first. Countries, I'm not sure. I mean, Harj was talking about the India, how things happened in the past. Now they went out for tender in the presentation, so you never know. Mindset we have to get right.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. If I want to be ambitious, maybe I could say that the Benelux countries, as it was already discussed, because there are the big ports, so there is a big of capacity there. So in Europe, we could see that as a possibility for a first Hyperloop challenge for freight, because then all the capacity issue that the Antwerp and Rotterdam port are having could be helped with the Hyperloop solution.
I mean, from my side, I think, Sabine, I think you're right. I mean, there's a huge focus on technology and innovation as part of the diversification program in the Middle East, away from petrocarbons. So I think there is a huge push there to look at technology. The other thing is, you're in a very different regulated environment in the Middle East. Totally different. There's one good thing about autocracies: they just tell you what to do, and you get on with them. So I think there is an opportunity there. I think there's some mega projects that are ongoing that create that opportunity. Like Oxygen is a brand new port, and it is totally driven by innovation and technology. So technologies like this are a fit. I think it's up to the industry to be able to demonstrate that they are ready for that investment to come in, and for the industry and the technology providers that are here today to be able to hit those targets and demonstrate that we are able to deliver the performance on time and within the budgets that are set. I think moving on from that, I think India is probably the fastest growing economy in the world at 7% GDP. So you've got a huge growth going on right there. There is a huge e-commerce industry, but the goods that they're exporting, the ports can't handle right now. As I said, there's 13 major ports. 5 6 of those are running at 100% capacity, so there's opportunities there. And I also think the first case, certainly for technology like Nevomo, will be in an enclosed use case to enable control and tech development to be rolled out.
Mm-hmm. Nothing to add from my side. Yeah.
Done.
Great. Some other questions from the audience?
I am the audience.
Hyper friends first. No. Second, Hans was first since 30 minutes. Yes.
Maybe also a bit of a difficult question, but around the 1900s, under London, there was a sort of Hyperloop operating with pods and pneumatic pressure to deliver post. That failed in the end due to a lot of mechanical failure, and then they were overtaken by road transport, basically. How are we going to prevent that with Hyperloop, that in this startup phase, when technology is young, some failures will actually influence the future of the system?
So cannot answer it like for a full Hyperloop, but for our system, like as Nevomo, the answer is quite easy as the base is railways. So if our system fails, for example, in a steel factory, you can always dig out your shunting locomotive, which is still there, and just do the operations as it was before. So the risk of failure, also like it's a smaller project, is at the beginning quite low, and then we learn, we industrialize, we do it better. And then at the end, we will only be allowed to deploy such kind of a technology if it follows the same safety guidelines and basically assurances that current railway technology has. And then I think we are at the same level as railways. And then from our point of view, the risk to fail is quite low compared to a brand new infrastructure.
I think it's a great question. And I think as we develop the technology, I think we need to bear in mind that new technologies will come. So you've got to future-proof what we're doing. So enabling protocols to be built into the system to enable upgrades is absolutely critical. If something comes left wing out of the middle of nowhere, you may not be able to cater for it. But generally that the technologies in AI, autonomous, robotics, they're all here. We need to take a leaf out of what's going on in the bigger technology ecosystem to understand what those trends are and ensure that what we are doing is not blocking ourselves for actually introducing some of those at a later date. So, future-proof technology.
I am wondering that also that because when Hyperloop first came to the public, it was more for passenger, and now we are also talking about freight. That this is also not because of also having a safe, secure system, reliable system, and trying it for freight first before we move passengers to it. Because then, of course, if there are some failures and there are some hiccups, it can be corrected, it can be further improved. And then when the system is reliable and safe, can be then moved to passengers. And then this would also give credibility and to the society, and there will be more acceptance.
One thing I would like to add, Hans, to that, I think one big shift to the early 1900s is that we do projects different these days. The agile mindset has really changed. although in Germany sometimes it's not quite there, but it has changed. So these days you go, especially the younger generation, on a fail-fast system, yeah? So it's not a burden, you know, where before it was you could not fail, you could not show failure. And in the early 1900s for sure. These days you've got MVPs. These days you look at all the phone companies, that's the way they work. They bring out something into the market, they test it, something didn't work, they try it again. It's not a failure per se, and I think that is a big change to the early 1900s.
I just want to add to that. Has anybody seen the documentary Blackberry? It's only just come out. I think it's well worth watching. But that's a classic example of where the technology provider really didn't understand what was going to come downstream. And you know, the technology that they were using was just a massive burden on the networks, and eventually it crashed the network. So yeah, I totally agree that you've got to be able to look ahead and understand what's coming. But I think nowadays, as we develop these systems and we layer them, then those layers need to actually understand and provide enough capacity for an upgrade.
And afterwards, Hyperfriends can come on stage. Please say some sentences, who you are.
Okay. Florian Wignert from ThyssenKrupp Transrapid, so the old maglev, so to speak, which is not thought for freight, although we sometimes plan freight trains. And so I would like to put forward the primary question. I apologize if it has been answered on one of the previous Hyperloop conferences. I'm here the first time. Why using maglev? Why using magnetic levitation for heavy freights? At first you would think it just takes energy to lift it. Why not use wheels? And we have just heard the top speed is mostly not so important maybe for freight. I have my personal opinion on that, or I have also an idea. I will not, don't worry, I will not say it. But I just want to say I'm not asking this as a provocating question, but I would be interested in what are your personal answers to this question.
Yeah. But I'm also interested in your point of view, or maybe give it last not to nudge us. So from my point of view, as said, freight is not about speed, it's about frequency and capacity. This is absolutely true. And at 120, 160, it's more efficient to stay on wheels because the wheel-on-wheel steel friction is super low. It's more about accelerating the heavy loads. This is, I think, for the start, right, but think a bit ahead. So we will have higher speeds in the network, independent from railway or a Hyperloop tube. So if you have low speeds and high speeds, you are destroying capacity. So even if it's not needed from customer side, if you could leverage the capacity overall in an infrastructure, an Hyperloop or a railway network, then you could do it by just speeding it up. So even if not needed, having levitating containers, if you could run in the same speed as an ICE train, maybe now, and then going forward, together with Hyperloop capsules for passenger transport, you have a higher capacity than speed spread. And the alternative would be to slow down passengers, and I think this will never happen, because people value their travel time. So that would be my, maybe a bit also provocative answer to the question.
I think you've answered it.
Yeah. So what's your point of view on it? You want to add something?
Okay. Well, I'm not the techie about telling magnetic levels. That's where when I'm out. I'm fascinated by the technology, but I can't really add to that. For me, from a logistics point of view, I look more at what is the benefit from a cost and from a routing perspective. What is a capacity benefit? Yeah, I see with all what I've heard, all what I've learned in the last few months, what it can bring in the capacity terms. And I think about we were talking earlier with Ben. We were talking in the break. I look at, for instance, ports, right? And in ports, you have container movements. Now, why should the port say, well, you mentioned it before, 6, 8, 10 weeks, a container is on the ship. Why should it be all of a sudden urgent when it gets to the port? Per se, not. If I think one step further and I say, well, if I can move, depending on the port, and I don't know the technology details, but if I can move 1,500 containers a day instead of 1,000. That means for me, if I have the adequate possibility with the craneage on and off the ship, that goes quicker. And you see, when you read the news, when you hear the news, what's going on in the ports around the world, when the ships are queuing up, then I might just have a use case when I say, okay, that could be quicker. So I look more, as a logistics person, I look more at the fact of what does it bring me? And that's why I mentioned to Martin as well, there needs to be a trigger point when I can see the benefit, when I say, okay, it costs me to invest in infrastructure. I have to think about how I work with different parties. How can I have the compatibility? At the same time, when we not talk about freight, how can it be safe enough, yeah, for passengers? How can I convince people that's actually good? But that's all part of it. I need to actually have a use case where I say, in the end, I will benefit from it, from a cost, from an efficiency point of view, and then logistics-wise, it makes sense. I hope that helped a little bit the idea.
Would you also like to say your opinions today? Because everyone asks that question if it comes to freight and...
For me, Sabine's answer was very complete. So I fully agree with her.
Sorry, what I would just say is I think Stefan is right. Low speeds, heavier weights, I think what we're doing there is using propulsion. Levitation starts where you are looking to increase speed but a lighter load. So I think the two combined is probably where it'll be.
Okay, your point of view. Thank you very much. Shall I really? Yeah, I can do it. I'm not sure. It's well, I'll just say, I don't think the high speed is really necessary for freight. And now I see a point combining passenger and freight. But I have my doubts about that because high speed is very expensive, and freight doesn't need it. But I see another point. The network point, of course, of Hyperloop, getting points, goods from point to point, because as I hear, most of the time in rail transit is lost in shunting operations. And that's probably also most the bottleneck for getting more goods on the tracks, the shunting. And if the shunting is gone, you have much more capacity on the track. So I see the network point of Hyperloop, but not the high-speed point. So you could do that with wheel rail. You could set up a Hyperloop network with wheels instead of magnets. But then there's the point that someone else said before. You asked it. What happens if something goes wrong on the track and everything is digested then until you get the thing out of the pipe? And maglev, of course, has much less wear and tear. The Transrapid never stopped on the track in Shanghai yet for 20 years. It doesn't happen because it's reliable. And this reliability you need even more if you have that network with thousands of pods running around. So could make sense to use maglev even for lower speed here, and even if although it takes more energy, but just to get the network reliably running would be my answer.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Mehmet, short question, short answer, or could we do it later on the private ship? What is your answer?
We talked about, Harj, you mentioned IMEC, India, Middle East corridor, Hyperloop maybe sometime we can think about. So what about middle corridor, the Belt and Road Initiative, connecting East and West? I heard I know some people in the community talking to Chinese guys, going there, some events to talk on Hyperloop. So how will it be Hyperloop in this corridor?
Mehmet, I didn't want to get into the politics. This is a technology conference. Look, the bottom line is, there are different opinions, political opinions here, and you've got the Belt and Road Initiative that's been going on for 10 years, which has been a core policy of the Chinese government. One of the absolute core policies for over a decade. Now, it so happens that the G20 countries have decided that they want to have an alternative to that. Now, having two roads going east-west is not a bad idea. It's creating competition if I look at it in the long term. But at the moment, what it is an alternative to that. And yeah, going from Bombay to Saudi, the UAE, across land, using SAR and up into Jordan, Israel, and across the Mediterranean. I think it's a great alternative.
My question is actually not so political. The feasibility in it. Does it work from China or from India to Europe?
Well, half the railway is already being built. If you look at the GCC network, it's already under construction. Yeah. So if you actually look at the map.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always look at the map.
Well, most of it is being constructed. I'll run it through you. North-South Railway is built, running to Riyadh. Yeah. Riyadh down to Abu Dhabi is now under construction. Yeah. The East-West link, the land bridge, is about to be let, linking Riyadh across to Jeddah. Yep. So then the question is, what happens as you go out of Saudi into Jordan and then into Israel? And that still needs to be developed. But the commitment has now come in there, not only from the countries that are actually involved, but also from the US as well. So, I think there's a long way to go in developing this. I mean, it only came out a week ago, but a lot of it is in place. But I think look, at the end of the day, the proof's in the pudding, where the devil's in the details sort of thing. And that'll come out.
Last comment, we need to bring some, if we can, Chinese and US guys to these conferences to speak. It is your responsibility.
We will try.
More US involvement, more Chinese involvement, if we can.
Thanks. I take it with me. Thanks. We have all homeworks. Some last word or sentence you want to say into the camera for the people behind televisions at home? So it's almost afternoon. Families are coming together. What do you want to say to the audience right now as a last sentence, as an outcome from that panel discussion? Maybe one word or one sentence, please.
So people behind the televisions at home, come to Draco, it's still open tomorrow, and visit the Nevomo booth.
That's good.
Where's the pirate ship? You've been talking about the pirate ship all day. I want to know where it is.
What do you mean? I saw the pirate ship.
Yes.
Later you come to me, be like.
Well, that's all I want to know.
It's also turning.
Okay.
We will speak later. Yeah. It's waiting for us, for sure.
That's it. Me finished.
For me, what is not only this panel, but what I heard today is that teaming up, joining together, and I see a very good progress since I started to follow Hyperloop this February, so I'm still quite new. So it's very nice to see the speed that it took up now, and looking forward, and the collaboration and working with the sector together.
I'm 100% with Judit, what you just said. So the word of team, no? Together everyone achieves more, should work here as well. And the main thing is start doing, start acting. I think that's the key to it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody. Stay here. We make a picture. We make a group picture.